What's going on, guys? Marty Jacobs here, and welcome to episode 1 of the Stay Strong podcast. I'm so stoked to be finally getting this podcast out to you guys. I really hope you enjoy it. Stay Strong as a brand really stands for almost like a slang. State being the state of where you are as a person, both physically, mentally, and sometimes even spiritually, and strong being the strength that you've gained through both the positive and negative things you've walked through in your life. So I'm really excited to get this out to you guys. I've had the chance to sit down and talk to a lot of really interesting people from all sorts of different backgrounds with all sorts of interesting and sometimes crazy stories. First and foremost, the goal of this podcast is to be entertaining. If you're not enjoying yourself, then you're not going to listen. So, and over and above that, maybe it's going to be inspirational to some of you. Maybe some of the guests you can relate with. Maybe it's going to strike a nerve with you based on maybe some things that you didn't know other people have walked through. It's hard telling. At the end of the day, I want you to enjoy it. Enjoy sitting down and listening to it. Episode 1's guest is a good friend of mine I've known for years and years, Brandon Witt. We've traveled all over Ohio together, and even recently to Mexico. So he's got a really interesting story. He's been through a lot that I think a lot of people don't even realize he's been through. And those things have helped shape who he is now and a lot of the success that he's seeing now. So I hope you enjoy episode 1 of the Stay Strong podcast. What's going on, everyone? This is Marty Jacobs. Welcome to the Stay Strong podcast. Excited to have a good friend of mine, Brandon Witt, on the show. Brandon, how you doing, my friend?
Good, Marty. How about you, man?
I am doing awesome. It's really a shame because we were getting the mics tested and we were having a great conversation.
Absolutely.
About motorcycles. And so, but I don't want to have that conversation all over again. But now all I can think about
you
is...
guys missed it now forever.
Yeah. And I miss having a motorcycle. And so I live vicariously through all my friends with motorcycles. But Brandon, I was thinking about this the other day. How long have you and I known each other? Because I feel like we've known each other as acquaintances for a long time.
Yeah.
But we really... Because I've lived in Jackson for 11 years. And so when did you join the service?
In 07.
07. So we met when you got out then, I would think.
Probably. Well, as far as being actual friends, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I think we probably ran into each other before then around different places with other people that we knew.
Yeah.
Common people that we knew.
Yeah, it was just fleeting glances.
Yeah. As far as like really being friends and actually hanging out and stuff, I'd say it's probably been in the past 5-6 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, really what I want to start out with is just let's start from young Brandon, the wee tyke, Now, you're not the baby of your siblings, right?
No, I'm the second.
That's what I thought. You're almost the baby.
Yeah.
And then there's a surprise.
I got older brother, me, sister, then the youngest brother.
Oh, I had you guys reversed. That should make you feel really good because for a minute I thought you were the youngest brother.
No,
you're
but
welcome.
I did get told by another mutual friend of ours that I look way older than my older brother, so I didn't really know how to take that.
We know who your real friend is.
Yeah.
We know who your real friend is.
I was like, whoa, buddy, what are you doing?
You just remember when you're out on your motorcycle this conversation.
Hey, I always stop and let you know.
Yeah, I would like to say Brandon is the only friend of mine with a motorcycle.
I just stand on the corner and wait for you to come back.
Yeah, he's literally stopped at my job. I manage a gym. That's one of my many jobs. And he stopped by on a nice day with his motorcycle, just came in and threw me the keys. My little heart was palpitating out of my chest, and I was fired up to get out. And I just need a little fix, a little fix, and then I'm good. And then I'm good for like 6 months or days. We'll see. It depends. It depends on how many nice
bikes, the weather is,
how nice the weather is, and how many people are out with non-stock pipes on their bike.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it just sounds like a mean muffler, it doesn't bother me too bad.
It's not too appealing.
So, are you from the Jackson area originally?
No. Originally was born in Columbus.
So you are
on
a
the
city
east side.
boy.
Yeah, deep down, I guess. Deep down. On the east side by Walnut Ridge and Whitehall area. So we grew up there, lived there till a couple months prior to my 13th birthday.
So you guys were there for a while.
So yeah, till I was 12, almost 13. And then we moved down to Gallia County, which is along the river. And then lived there down in a little town called Patriot or Patriot, depends on who the heck you ask, I guess. And had a bunch of Amish neighbors, and it was a drastic change, like overnight, from gangs all around you to horse-drawn carriages like it was 1800s. So it was really weird.
Did you run into any Amish mafia?
No. I think that's probably one of the dumbest shows that's ever aired on television.
Yeah, I got news for you all. We live in I'm not going to say it's the biggest Amish community, but it's a fairly strong one.
Just under Holmes County, which is where apparently the Amish Mafia is.
Yeah, and we haven't, I mean, unless they're all doing it incognito and doing a real good job of hiding it from the cops.
Yeah.
I think
it's staged.
I know. I hate to break the news to you all.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's real.
No.
So talk about growing up. 13, like you, what was it? Were you freshman, or were you getting ready to go into your freshman year when you moved?
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in the city like that? Because that is polar opposite to where you moved.
Huge difference. A lot of times we had a lot of rival gang activity even on our block, on our street. One end where was one gang, at the opposite end of our street was an opposing gang. So obviously there's a lot of foot traffic, regular traffic, sales, all that type of stuff. But we had a lot of gang fights because we lived in the middle of the ends.
I'm going to interrupt you. By cells, Brandon's talking about illegal narcotics and street pharmaceuticals. Just in case you weren't sure.
Just in case.
So anyhow,
I wasn't talking about furniture sales.
Yeah, exactly.
So there was, that typical activity, but we also had a lot of fights in the middle of the road. People would just, seeing a guy get a smiley face, which is a nice cut from ear to ear on the throat.
Gosh.
So yeah, that's pretty drastic, from living up there to living in the middle of the woods. So there was a lot of times we would get our house threatened to be shot up and stuff all the time.
And that's what
not to pull racial, because I don't get into that crap, but we were typically, we were pretty much the only white people around.
Yeah.
And the opposing gang was also a white oriented gang. So they just, some people just immediately thought we took sides, and we're like, dude, we just live here.
Right. So you guys were stuck in the middle, and just because you were the same race as the other gang.
Right. It was
that's what I was going to ask, is what your all's dynamic was. So it sounds like you were just stuck in the middle of it.
Yeah, it obviously we weren't really playing any part in any of that. My parents weren't involved in that stuff, at least at that point in their life.
So what were your parents doing for work at that point?
My dad was a contractor, and he worked for the city of Bexley he did their tree service. So he did both. And then he, at different times, owned different construction companies, a lot of drywall work and stuff like that.
Well, and I know I'm pretty vocal about it. Your dad is one of my favorite people. I love some of your dad. And he's just a character, man. And I know, was that, because we've talked about it, you and your brothers worked with your dad. So is that when you first started doing some of that work up there?
Oh, yeah. We, 5 years old was the first time I hung drywall.
Really?
So, yeah. Wasn't much child labor law going on.
I bet that was an interesting sight, too.
Yeah, I was still pretty sure they owe me a couple $1,000s. Almost certain of it. We kept time cards and everything. I just never did get the check.
I'd be really curious to hear your dad's perspective on that.
Oh, he knows.
So you started working from a really young age then.
Yeah. That was, for us, because we didn't go to school, so we were homeschooled. And a lot of our education was based around work. We were just more work forced, or not forced to work, but work oriented outside of education, I guess. So.
Yeah. So what was your normal day look like for the Witt boys whenever, say...
It depends on what age level, but, younger age, obviously we would get up and would do, mom was around at that time to do, actual schoolwork and stuff like that. And then depending on what time of year it was, we was playing baseball or something like that in the evenings.
So you got to go out and do some stuff.
Yeah.
Then. You weren't just slave labor by your dad.
No, I don't want to make it sound like Dad was like out there with a whip and driving us to pull the sled or nothing like that. But,
there you go.
We definitely worked more than other kids.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
But it makes me appreciate that stuff though. I mean, I'm glad, even now when I get a chance to do a job with him, I always try and bring him around.
Oh yeah.
Do a job together. So
at least for the
fun.
Commentary.
Oh yeah. Yeah. For
no,
sure.
Your dad's one of the hardest working guys I know. Sometimes it's almost like,
yeah, pump the brakes. Guy.
Yeah, you can slow down
You're
now.
old and little. It's like, you don't have to do this anymore. Stop.
Oh, listen, if you all only knew, he is a small little man, but his heart is significantly larger than his body.
Yeah, he needs a wheelbarrow for his heart, but his and his attitude. But the rest of him, you can fit in your front pocket.
That's amazing. I'm going to take that and I'm going to save that for next time I see him. So let's fast forward. So what spurred the move for you all to move down south?
It was really getting pretty rough. And Mom and Dad noticed that I was really liking, I'd ride my bike down to these different people's houses. And they would, always try to get me to do stuff, race this person, do this, do that. And, I was starting to think it was really cool. And Dad was like, there's no way that, I'm going to let him get sucked into this stuff. So, and they just always wanted to be out of the city. So it was really just a freak thing. They were looking in a newspaper, and the house that we actually wound up buying was listed in this paper. Well, the ad was in the paper, but it hadn't actually been listed in that paper because it was listed for down here. And why it was ever published in a Columbus newspaper, we don't know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So my mom calls on it, not thinking that it was this far away. And so we drive down one day, look at it, and we wind up just, giving them like a deposit to hold the house. And then it was, we sold our house and couldn't move. Well, actually, I'm sorry, back up. We actually had already sold our house. So we were actually living in my grandma's house for like 2 to 3 weeks with nowhere to live. U-Haul still sitting in the middle of the road on Yearling in Whitehall. So we were like, we got to have a house. So then they see this house and we come down, look at it and buy it. So then that's when we moved down here, and that was in 92, I believe, 92.
So what was that culture shock
No,
like?
95, yeah. Oh, it was insane. It's insanely different. So, yeah, I mean, it went from being right in the middle, of the city, and then lived on a gravel road. And we was like, I didn't even know that stuff existed. I didn't know there was gravel roads and stuff like that. Definitely didn't even know there was Amish people. I didn't know that stuff existed. So I was like, it was a huge change. And then immediately we just started, meeting people and stuff like that, and started getting involved in different farmers and all that. And me and my older brother, we started working for about 4 or 5 different farmers. So our whole teenage years was baling hay, cutting spudding tobacco, and it was just completely the opposite of what our lives would have been like still in Columbus.
So do you feel like your all's transition was pretty smooth then overall?
I think if we were actually in school, it probably would have been a little different.
Yeah, because you guys were homeschooled.
Since we didn't go to school,
yeah,
it was it wasn't as drastic, I guess, because it's not like we really had a whole lot of friends anyways. So it was like, it wasn't really missing much, I guess, besides family that was up there.
Yeah, because is that where all your family was living? You didn't have any in the Gallipolis area?
Oh, no, we didn't even know anybody down
so
there.
the move was really to get out of the area, and because you found like a crazy deal. Mm-hmm. And that's really crazy that you found a
there
house.
wasn't even listed. I mean, I don't even, they were like, well, where did you see this at? And, we're like, well, we're in Columbus.
So wait. You're saying that they hadn't listed it anywhere local? they had the house in Gallipolis. They hadn't listed it locally, but then it ended up listed in the Columbus.
No, they had
newspaper.
Listed it here in this area, but not in Columbus.
And then
So they were
came
like,
across
"How did you see it in the newspaper there? Like we didn't list it in there."
Wow. So how long did you all live in that area?
I lived there until 2001, 2000 or 2001. Then I moved, which we spent a lot of time. Even when we lived down there, we spent most of our time in Jackson, where we are now. So even though we lived down there, we spent most of our time up here, and as far as with church and stuff like that. So we were always in this area more so than we were down in Gallia. And then I moved out in 2001, and I got a little house in Wellston and started renting that when I was like 18, 19.
Oh, so you were out on your own pretty early.
Oh, yeah.
So what spurred you wanting to get out on your own 18? Because there's a lot of kids that are like, I'm gonna enjoy this mom and dad or mom or dad ride as long as possible.
Well, I mean, I had already been working since, my whole teen years anyways. I paid for all my own stuff, we didn't, as far as a lot of work and stuff like that, we grew up pretty poor. So it wasn't like it was just some plush mom and dad's, buying our cars and buying all this stuff. We just didn't have it. So it really wasn't a big difference for me. I'd already paid for all my stuff that whole time anyways. So, it was, to me, it was like, well, I'm not driving to work now from Gallipolis. I'll get my own house.
Yeah.
So I found a place for $300 and started renting it off of a guy I knew and started doing my own thing.
There you go. So I know for a lot of kids, especially potentially kids that have been in a homeschooled environment, because usually, your family's real tight-knit because you guys are all, constantly around one another.
Yeah.
So did you notice a big difference in having kind of that unsupervised freedom from your parents as far as, behavior or the things that you wanted to try and experiment with?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I went way crazy way quick.
So it was, you were pretty tame, and then you moved out on your own. So
for the most part, yeah.
So what happened? Like, describe how that change happened for you.
When I got out, and I started living on my own, of course, I'm making my own money. I've got my own house. I'm like, nobody can tell me what I can and can't do. It's like, there is no my house, my rules now. It's now my house, my rules. So it's like, I could do whatever I wanted. And so then I just, started doing what everybody else was doing. Started drinking, all the guys I worked with were all older than me. So, I did construction because obviously that's what my dad taught us how to do. So I started working for different companies, and, I'd travel back and forth to Columbus every day. And all those guys they'd smoke weed on the way to Columbus and drink all the way home. So it was like, as soon as the 2:00, boom, we're off the clock, the first gas station on the way home, fill up a cooler, and everybody drank on the way home. And then they drank all the evening. So it was like, oh, okay. And then they're like, why don't you just come to the house, afterwards? And, so it just kind of went, crazy after that.
Oh, yeah.
So, at first, when I first moved up, I worked at Walmart. So I met some people at Walmart and was working there. I was on third shifts. And then I left there because I got a job offer somewhere else. And that's when I started traveling back and forth to Columbus.
Yeah. And so you're out on your own, you're expanding the horizons of your extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
And so this is, 18, 19 years old. What, as far as your relationship with your parents, what was going on with that then at that point?
Oh, it got really bad. Most of, probably about 2 years, no one really spoke to me. I think mainly because they were upset at what I was doing, because we were raised in a really strict home. And then, knowing what I was into and what I was doing, nobody really talked to me. I stopped going to church with them and all that stuff, which was another incident. I mean, there were some other things that happened with that caused me to really be like, yeah, I'm not doing this, at that point in my life. But then it was like, nobody really talked to me. My dad would come around some, just because he's just hard nosed like me. So he's not easily offended. He don't get his feelings hurt real easy. So, we would have some conversations and stuff every now and then. But for the most part, I rarely seen anybody for about 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for you,
and by that point, I was pretty much in my early 20s.
Yeah.
So.
And how did that impact you? Were you kind of like, hey, great, leave me alone, let me do my thing? Or how did that affect you then?
I really, it was really hurtful at the time, because I was just like, wow, I'm not doing things your way, so it's screw Brandon. It's really how I felt. And I was like, man, that's pretty crappy. I was like, that's, I would never do that, and you think, I would never act that way. And, I wouldn't respond that way. Which we've had those conversations obviously now, years and years later. But yeah, at that time I was just like, okay, fine. You don't want to talk to me, I don't talk to you, and really lost a lot of that connection that we all had, due to that. Which, like I said, a lot of it obviously was my fault. It was things that I was choosing to do, that led to that. But, still, it's like, I wouldn't have been mad if somebody called.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm still alive.
Yeah. But, it's like I said, we've had those conversations now, and everybody looking back is like, yeah, we probably could have done stuff different.
Oh, yeah. And that's sometimes the hard part, is looking back and owning areas that's like, you know what, what I did here wasn't right.
Yeah.
So, but definitely. Now let's fast forward. You said you joined the Marines, early 2000s?
In 2007. So I was 24. I had been, at this point, working on cell towers. So I was traveling all over, and at first, my girlfriend at the time was pregnant, and while I was traveling and all this stuff, I'd be gone for, a week or 2, 3 at a time, depends on where the jobs were at, installing antennas and building towers and all that. And then then she had the baby, and she's 12 now. So we had a daughter, and then I still worked on the road there for a while, but the job was supposed to last, we had a contract for 3 years, and we finished the work a year early. So it really kind of screwed us, because we finished up the jobs before they had more to do. So we got laid off, and my boss was really good about it for about 6 months. And he kept paying her, he paid me a full paycheck, every week.
Wow.
Because it was like, he got paid obviously the same amount for all those jobs. We just weren't getting paid because we finished them early. He was really good about it for a while, but then he called me. He's like, hey, I can't keep paying you for nothing. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he's like, we got to lay you off, da-da-da-da-da. So we go on vacation, and I'm sitting in Myrtle, and I always wanted to join the Marine Corps. Like, ever since I was a little kid, that's, I always wanted to join the Marine Corps. So I'm sitting there, went on vacation with my girlfriend's family, and I said, I'm just going to go. I was like, I'm done here. I'm tired of trying to work these jobs that I'm doing, and I just want to go and actually have a career, do something. And so she's like, well, whatever, if that's what you're going to do. And I'm like, all right. And I'm literally laying there drinking beer on the beach. And I call the recruiter, and I'm like, hey, have my papers ready when I get back. And which I'd already talked to the guy like 100 times. I just backed out every other time. He goes, all right. He changed the dates on stuff. And when I got back that week, I came straight to his office and signed the papers and left that October. So it was a couple months later.
So you joined up, and it sounds like this was something that, you've been thinking about since you were a little kid.
I wanted to do it forever.
So you get into boot camp. How did you handle boot camp? Because I know some people they just have a huge culture shock.
Some people have a heck of a time with it.
Yeah.
It wasn't too. I was, like I said, I was 24 at that point. The biggest problem for me was the drill instructors were my age.
Oh, so that was weird.
So because they probably, most of the time people join when they're 18, 19. So these guys had already been in, for their first contract, their first 4-year contract. So now they're drill instructors, and I'm like, dude, I've never let someone talk to me like this before. Like, and it's really hard to refrain from, mouthing off and being like, dude, you're the same age as I am. It's like, don't talk to me like I'm a kid. But at the same time that, once you're in for a while, you understand the process and why things are done the way they're done and all that stuff to build a unit and stuff like that. But obviously when you're first there, everything's confusing anyways. I mean, it don't matter if you go in and you're 40, it's still confusing. You're still learning how to tie your shoes, whether you think you know how to tie them or not.
Right.
So yeah, it's a culture shock no matter what age. But yeah, I mean, there'd be people sitting over there laying and crying and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's really not that bad. You just do what you're told. It's like, I don't know why you're crying.
So you get out, and I don't know how much you had planned. Like, you had said you were looking for a career. So you get out of boot camp. Was it like, hey, I want to go overseas. Let's do this. Was it
I planned on, I mean, when I joined, I was like, I'll stay in until they kick me out.
Yeah.
It's like, or I die, one or the other.
And I know some guys, all kinds of different people have all kinds of different motivations for joining the military. Now, anyone that enlists, I have the utmost appreciation for, because they're willing to say, I'm, regardless of what branch they're in, obviously different branches see more action.
Just know the Marine Corps is better, that's all.
Right. I have no leg in this argument, and so I'm just going to agree mindlessly.
Yeah.
So, but was your intention to, like, where was your mind at with the possibility of you being in combat before you got your marching orders?
Yeah. At first, it's a little nerve-wracking, because you don't know. And with my job, I knew there was two different sides to it. So you could be put on a side where you were non-deployable, or you could be put on a side where you would be doing like route reconnaissance and clearance for patrols, for trucks and all that stuff, or you could be literally just doing regular ground pounder stuff, which is just doing foot patrols in the middle of a combat zone. So it was really nerve-wracking, and you don't really find out which direction you're going to go until you graduate school. So when I graduated school, I got put on the field side, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, this is better than the other. At least this will be more fun, but you're going to be deployed. You know what I mean? It's like within a year, you're going to be deployed. So, get through graduate school, and I did really good in the Marine Corps. I mean, I got promoted fast. I was always, I got put in charge of things way above my pay grade. And, I did really, really good because I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Even the stuff that sucked, I still loved it. So, yeah, I mean, when I first found out, that I was going on the first deployment, it was a little crazy. Because you still, I mean, I at this point, I'd had several buddies who had been over, because several friends of mine had joined before me, and others, were kind of right there close to me, were on deployments at that time and all that stuff. So you always know what's going on. And obviously, when that's your job, you pay more attention to that type of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
As the civilian world, a lot of times you just kind of pay attention to what flashes across the news, and that's about it. But when it's your actual job, you kind of dig into it a little more. So obviously we pay attention to all this stuff that's going on. Then you find out what area you're going to, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's still a good little spot to go. That sounds like a nice vacation. Which Iraq for us at that time wasn't really that bad. When we went to Iraq. So it wasn't, at that time I was on a security team, and we did route recon. So we cleared the way for semi-truck drivers and stuff that were transporting goods from one area of Iraq to the other. So our job really as the lead Vics in the convoy were to find bombs. So, I mean, that's what we did. We tried to find bombs. Didn't really have much going on, as far as that type of activity at the times that we were there. Then we got back, and it was all cool, and 9 months later I was in Afghanistan. So it wasn't much of a rest period. And at that time, my wife got pregnant again, which is typical with military families. You go on deployment, you come back.
I've missed you, baby.
You get someone pregnant.
Yeah, I've
Hopefully
missed
it's just your wife.
Yeah, exactly. That would be ideal.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
you don't have to handle a lot of legal paperwork overseas.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, yeah, then I was right back in Afghanistan, and we did the invasion in Marja.
So
2010.
How did your experience with Iraq and Afghanistan compare?
Oh, they were pretty different. Iraq, we were in mounted patrols, which is in trucks. Afghanistan, we flew in on a helicopter and got dropped off at one base and got a truck ride in the middle of the night to the middle of nowhere. We didn't even know where we was at till the daylight came up. So,
wow.
And then at that point, I was just on some little patrol base in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Marja.
So you weren't, I mean, as far as large military installations, you guys weren't anywhere near.
We literally took over someone's house, which is a mud hut.
Wow.
You know, and was like, gave him some money and was like, hey, we have need of this.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, this is ours now. Sorry for you. Go put some mud together down the road.
Wow. So you end up out there. What's going through your mind? I mean, is it just the job? You've got the job ahead of you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're so conditioned at that point, you know, as far as this is the job. Mm. But, you know, and I'd obviously been in for a while at that point and was a squad leader and all that. But I also had another, you know, I was a DOD, what they call a advisor, a foreign military advisor, which means I would train foreign military. So we did what's called a PMT, a police mentor team, and we were attached to 2-9 during the invasion, the second wave of the invasion, to do training for the Afghan military, to teach them how to do their own patrols. But obviously to do that, you grab a bunch of people that can't speak the same language as you and take them on a foot patrol.
Right.
While getting shot at. And hope that they respond the same way. You know what I mean? So it could be really, it was really crazy until you build up some trust. And it takes a long time, obviously, for them to trust you. Because you really just got to play a game with them. You know? It's like being a used car salesman. You know, you got to talk in circles and make them think it's their idea. Yeah. You know, it's like, no, you want to spend $27,000 on this car that's worth $15,000. You know,
right.
Like, oh, you're right, I do.
You really want to go on a patrol and get shot at with a bunch of Americans.
It's going to be awesome, I promise.
So I mean, it sounds like you had a lot of active situations in Afghanistan.
Yeah, especially when we were first there, it was getting shot at like every day. Mm. Yeah, I mean, it was constant. Somebody was getting blown up, somebody's getting shot at, it was anytime you left the wire, you know, or left your base, you pretty much knew. Yeah. And then for our little patrol bases that were out in the middle of, you know, just in the middle of the general area, they would just get attacked on daily basis.
Really?
Yeah.
So what?
I mean, and there's no head cover. It's about a 10 to 12 foot mud wall.
Wow.
In a square. And you're just got bunks in the middle of it.
So when you have these guys around you getting attacked, I mean, what do you guys do?
If we're close enough, then we would respond and try and, through radio traffic, find out where the stuff is coming from, where they're getting attacked from. If you're on the right side of it, then you would try and respond and get a team out to try and take out the ones that are shooting the other guys.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's organized chaos.
Yeah,
it's really all, and a lot of it's just a guessing game. I mean, it sounds real good. Maybe from a general's point of view, it's not a guessing game. But when you're on the ground, it's like, well, let's try this. Right. See what happens, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
So what was some of the sticky situations you personally ended up in?
At one point I come back and my son was born. Mm-hmm. And at this point I was out on a patrol base. So we didn't have phones and internet and stuff like that. So, a lot of the larger bases have that type of stuff. But we didn't even have our satellite phones for each patrol base yet. They hadn't even made it to the area. So, I mean, all we had was internal comms, so we couldn't call home or nothing like that. So if anything happens, as like an emergency back in the States or whatever, you get a Red Cross message. So I get a phone call. We're playing cards one night, sitting there on a bunk, and, which is, just like MASH.
Yeah, there you go. That's
just
a good
sits around
visual.
Playing cards.
There's like some 15-year-old kid listening, like, what's MASH? Yeah, is that a card game?
Yeah. So we were just hanging out playing cards, and the radio comes across that they need to talk to me. So I'm like, what the heck? I get over there, and they're like, hey, there's a truck coming out to get you. You need to have gear ready to come back to one of the bigger bases. You got a Red Cross message. And I'm like, oh, crap. Which I knew my wife was pregnant, obviously, and was getting ready to have a baby because I left and she was like 8 months pregnant. So it's only been 3 weeks in. So at any time she could have been having a baby anyways. So I get a Red Cross message and come back and I call back home in the middle of the night, and she had him, and he was in the NICU and was having some difficulties and stuff like that. And I was like, oh man, this sucks. And so I got to stay the night there where I had a phone. Next morning, got back up, called her again. And within a couple hours that morning, they were saying, hey, you're getting on a truck to go back out. And so I called her one more time and then didn't talk to her for 8 weeks.
What was the condition of your kid whenever you called?
Well, he was still in the NICU and like on the vent, like the, I don't know, the little microwave thing that they put him in. I don't know what it is. The little thing that they got him in, hooking him up to all kinds of stuff. And just because he was small and stuff. So he was like only 4 pounds something. So he was a little fella like me when I was born. So, and then, like I said, I didn't know when, I didn't get another Red Cross message, but I never talked to her again for like, I think it was 8 weeks. So like 2 months of being in combat and contact all the time and all this stuff. And, you start thinking, I'm probably never going to meet my son.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to make it back. And there was one day I had come back for a meeting on that same base about a week later. No, I'm sorry. This was the week prior to him being born. And so I'd only been there 2 weeks, and our big base got attacked for like 2-3 hours straight.
Wow.
Just bullets just raining down everywhere. And so we're running and take off and get geared up and go try and hunt these people down. And I remember sitting there that day and I was like, there's no way I'm surviving 7 months of this.
Wow.
There's no way. And I'm just sitting there riding in the back of a MRAP is what it's called. And I'm waiting for them to stop so that I could jump out with my team and start clearing houses and stuff in this area. And I'm like, we're not making it. There's just no way, and so it was, and then the thoughts, you got 7 more months of sitting there wondering what's going to happen. And a part of you just starts to just not care.
Yeah.
Because you just kind of write it off like, I'm probably not going to make it back. And, and that's I think the hardest thing that people deal with when they're in really hard combat areas where they're actually, in that type of stuff all the time, is the guys really starting to feel like, I'm probably not going to make it back anyway, so screw it. And then they start just being reckless.
Right.
They start being reckless in that zone, and it really starts to, cause problems for people.
Well, and I would imagine because, I've never experienced military, I've never been in the military, and I'm always really quick to let people know that because I have so much respect for you or anyone that's been in the military. But I would have to imagine it would be very difficult being in a situation like that and feeling like there's no real hope that I'm going to make it out of this alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And so during that time, it was like, I mean, the bullets would just fly, it sounds like a snap, like when paper gets ripped or something is what it sounds like when it goes past your face and stuff. And you're like, man, this, I'm inches from eating this thing. You know what I mean? It's like, so you're just like, this is nuts. I can't believe we're doing this.
Oh yeah.
And so months of that, and then another time that really freaked me out was I was getting shot at by a sniper. I was in an overwatch position, and he could see me, but I couldn't see him.
Oh gosh.
And it was making me so mad. And I allowed him to get 3 shots off because I kept standing there trying to find him. I was, looking through binos. I was looking through my scope and stuff. I couldn't find this guy anywhere. I mean, I knew where he had to be shooting from, but there was just, I couldn't see him.
Yeah.
And he was adjusting, and he kept getting closer and closer to me. And I'm like, this Joker's going to wind up, figuring out how to work his scope here in a minute because he keeps getting closer and closer. So after his 3rd shot, I just kind of fell over in the thing and made it seem like he hit me. And I sat there for about a half hour to give him time to think that he got me and pack up his stuff and leave. Because at that point I was like, if I stand back up again and he hasn't figured out his adjustments, he'll have it figured out by this next one. Because that last one hit right above my Kevlar. So I was like, I'm just going to lay here for a minute. And I just kind of sat down. And I remember laying there and I was like, and it was really, just one of those things that I'll never forget because it was just a crazy atmosphere, obviously, for the whole time. And I remember sitting there in that tower that day going, after I called it in and said that hey, we've got sniper fire and I can't find this guy, So everybody's kind of looking, trying to figure out, from a hide position where this guy could be and where we would be, if we were him. And there's only a couple locations in the area that we were at that somebody could really even pull off a shot, in that direction. So it was kind of easy to figure out where he was at, but you still couldn't see him. So you didn't want to call fire and drop bombs on a place that could have other people in it and not just him. So it was one of those things. It's like, I'm just going to have to take a loss on this one and not get this guy. Hopefully I'll get him another day. But I wonder, when I was sitting down, I was just like, man, God, don't let me die in this place. It was like, at that point, I really felt like, it was past the point of like, I'm probably not going to die. I'm probably not going to make it home, whatever. And you just kind of get really hardened. And you just get really mad about it, and you just do your job, and you're just like, I don't care anymore. I don't care about none of these people. I'm just going to play the game. I'm going to do what I got to do and make sure my people's fine, and you just get really, really tough about it. And at that point, I just sat there for like 20 minutes, and I was like, God, don't let me die in this place. Like this, I do not want this to be the last place I live. And so that was a really, like, just one of those moments of that deployment to really stand out. Just because it was so real at that point, right at that minute, that was like, yeah, I could have ate that very easily.
Well, yeah, and it's like you said, I mean, the next shot could have been it.
Yeah, and I was just like, this is not where I want to be. It's like Joe Dirt. Is this where you want to be when Jesus comes back? Like, not in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So you get past that moment with that sniper encounter, and what happens from there? Because I mean, you're not still in Afghanistan. So.
Yeah. Obviously, I made it back. At that, we lost 15 of our guys on that deployment. And what was really hard is, when I came back and I did meet my son. Of course, he was 6 months old by the time we got back. 3 of the other guys that were with us wives were pregnant at the same time that my wife was. And I obviously came back to meet my son and be able to raise him. And, those people didn't ever get to meet their dad.
Yeah.
They never got to, those guys never held their son. They never got to see him play ball. They're not teaching him how to hit and throw a ball and all that stuff. And, there's still days that really, really bothers me.
Oh,
because, obviously the thought of any of the guys over there, you have those thoughts of, man, if I die, my wife's going to have to get married and someone else is going to raise my kid. But then when you're at, the memorial service for, your guys, and you're all standing there and my wife's standing next to me holding my son that, I thought that I wasn't going to meet. And then I'm watching the wives of 3 other people standing there at their husband's picture, bawling their eyes out, holding their son. And it's just like, man, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is real, and I think that's the part that a lot of people, obviously a lot of people don't get to see that. That stuff's done, within your company and battalion and all that stuff. No one outside of that ever sees it and stuff. But, that then it's like, wow, you see the hurt and stuff and you're like, man, it's not, that's why I hate video games.
Yeah.
Most of my friends know I hate video games. I do. I hate them with a passion. And it's not just because it's all fake and it's not real, but it paints to me, and all of my military buddies all love Call of Duty and all this, and I'm just like, whatever. Not to mention that I'm terrible at them. I mean, it's beyond the fact that I can't get myself to turn and walk at the same time. It just really, to me, paints a unrealistic picture of life and death, and it really, I think, makes people not see the reality of it like it really is, and I think in a lot of ways causes people to live life probably not the way they would if they had a real realization of how things are as far as life and death and how easy it is to be done.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, that's a really good perspective. I never thought about, because you're getting all the action without any of the real consequences.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's a really, really good point. And especially for someone like you that's gotten to experience it, I mean, I can't imagine how difficult that would be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it was like, oh, why don't you come play Call of Duty? And I'm like, no, I'd rather do it for real. I mean, I like the real thing. as crazy as that would be.
So you were saying when you left, you were having your own battles with addiction. So you come back from Afghanistan. Do you remain enlisted in the military?
Yeah. For when I came back, just because of wear and tear from that deployment, IED blast and things like that, I didn't step on, well, I actually did step on a pressure plate IED, but it didn't actually go off, or I wouldn't be sitting here. But I've had IED blasts and things like that in a truck, and so just pretty much destroyed my back from the low end of it, L4 down. Towards the end of that deployment, it was getting so bad that my legs were starting to give out.
Ooh.
So I would just fall on a foot patrol. So, so we get back and we start normal life back home, and it started getting really bad. And it was to the point where, there was days that I would just kind of crawl through my living room, and I couldn't stand up. I couldn't stand upright at all. I was always kind of hunched over, and the pain was just getting to the point where I was like, man, they've got to do something. And I was so, because I knew that if I went to the doctor that I would probably wind up having to get medically retired. I didn't want to do that, so I postponed it for months. And then finally, my wife was like, you got to do something. You can't keep doing this. This is obviously not working. It's not going away. So I went and I had a bunch of damage to my lower back, some torn vertebrae and bulging disc and all this crap. So I started getting treated for it, which obviously they just started throwing pain meds to me. So, and with the lifestyle that I lived prior to that, that was just fun for me. Right. I was like, that lifestyle finds you no matter where you're at. You know what I mean? So, the party lifestyle, obviously, people think, oh, well, that stuff doesn't happen in there because it's all organized. Listen, there's prisons in the military too. It's called the brig, and there's a lot of people in them. Yeah. So, the same activities, all that stuff still goes on. All of those people that come out of civilian life are the ones that join. So, they a lot of times bring baggage with them. Mm. They just learn new skill sets while they're in there. Right. I'm not saying they don't serve and stuff. I was like, but people are still people. So, and for me, I had done some of that stuff before, as far as like, abusing pills and stuff while partying and all that. So when I had a free supply, it was just on. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was all over. I was still, most of my people, as far as most of the people that I worked for, my officers and all that stuff, they didn't know that. There was a small circle, obviously, that did, because at this point, even when I came back home, I was a squad leader for a while, and then I was a platoon sergeant for a while, and then I was the training NCO. So at this point, I'm working in the office with all the captains and majors and all this stuff, and staff NCOs. Obviously I wasn't, snorting pills on my desk. So Right. It was like, you keep it pretty quiet, but at the same time, it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I would get a month's supply and be done in 8 to 10 days of 150 pills. So, yeah. And then it was like, now you're just on the hunt for everyone else that, gets them. And so there was a small circle of us that it started really getting bad with. I was still really good at my job, but it was definitely causing a lot of problems at home. And it really drove, just a huge wedge and issues between, my wife and myself, and having the kids and stuff like that, and things that I did, and places I would go, was really getting shady. And one of the guys that was in our little circle of trust OD'd. Ooh. And so an NCIS is no joke. I know it's a cool TV show and stuff, but when you're actually sitting in their office and they're asking you questions because they're trying to pin a murder on somebody, oh yeah, I was sweating bullets.
That's
I was like,
crazy.
But I was so dumb, man. I was so stupid. I get the call to come up there, and a couple of my buddies had already been interviewed, and I was this guy's platoon sergeant anyway, so I knew I was going to get interviewed, because they're going to always interview the people that are in charge of him. But I was in charge of the guy, but we would also swap back and forth and do drugs and stuff together. So, it really started to affect my career. But at this point, I kind of knew that I was going to have to get out. They were going to force me out through medical retirement. So I was like, well, my career's pretty much over anyways. Mm-hmm. And it really just became really depressing because the only thing that I really wanted to do in my life was be a Marine. And now I've gotten injured, and now they're saying I can't stay in. And it's like, you know, my life's over, you know, and my career's over. So, you know, at that point I was really depressed and really angry about the whole situation. So I didn't really care, you know, so I just pretty much stayed high all the time. And me and this guy, you know, we would swap stuff and trade and do this, that, and the other, and typical drug type lifestyle stuff. And so I get called into NCIS, and I'm so stupid. I've literally got a tutor in my pocket, and that's pretty much just an emptied out pen.
Yeah, we wanted to clarify.
Yeah, just so that
not
you guys
the biscuit
know.
place.
Yeah, not Tutor's Biscuit World. Paraphernalia.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was so dumb. I was already high as crap by then, and I go walking in, and I get ready to open the door, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and I go running back to my truck. And just empty all my pockets. And I'm like, oh my God, I may not come out of this place. I don't need them to add charges to me. So I get in there, and of course they pat you down and stuff, you know, and I still have my
call.
Yeah, it would have been really bad. And I just had that thought right as I got ready to open the door, like, what if they search me? And I was like, boom, took off running back to my truck. So I'm like, I don't need this. And so I'm sitting in there, and I have to write out this huge statement. They asked me a bunch of questions and stuff. And you know, thankfully, you know, as I know that they've seen text messages between us, but, you know, we all had a little code, you know, that we would use certain words for stuff. So if you were to read the sentences, you would have no idea what it was. You know what I mean? It would literally, you'd be like, this makes no sense.
You got any fluffy kittens?
Yeah, it's like, you know, they'd be like, what are you talking about? You know, so I knew that they wouldn't be able to really pin anything on, because I knew that they had tapped his phone and all that. So they would have had all of our text messages. You know, NCIS is pretty handy with that stuff. So I was like, you know, and I'm thinking, okay, there's no way they can track anything off these text messages. But we all knew that they were trying, you know, because you have to pay the family a very large sum if the person dies while they're in the service. So, you know, that was our hunch at the time. Obviously, I don't know whatever happened with that. I mean, I know the family wound up getting the money afterwards because it was ruled not a suicide. It was accidental overdose. And so, you know, that all happened. And I, at this point, I know I'm getting ready to have to get out anyways. I had been on a med board for like a year at this point. So, and it's still, that stuff never stopped though for a couple of years later.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine, I mean, just knowing from my own experience, the chemical abuse becomes a way for us to deal with life. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah, I couldn't go to the grocery store without being messed up.
Yeah.
Like, well, I mean, it was like, you know what I mean? And that's what a lot of, you know, and I know there's a lot of people out there that struggle with this, and it's like, you know, I have to be numb before I can face the day.
It's how you become normal. It becomes the new normal. And so, and not to mention, you just had this crazy tragedy happen. I mean, someone that's real close to you, I would imagine that probably, those moments either help or hurt. Mm-hmm. And so I would imagine that just kind of drove it in even deeper.
Yeah, it was just, that stuff just kept, compiling together and stuff. So, yeah. And it's like, you know, I think in a lot of ways people don't ever really fully pull, you know, we call it having a switch. Like when you're on deployment, you flip the switch and then you come home, you turn it back off. Well, the more you do it, the less you get it turned all the way back off.
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of times, you know, you never really get that switch turned back off. You're not always walking around ready to kill anything or shoot at something that's every loud noise. But, you know, some people don't ever get past that, turning it all the way back off. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people that do is great. You know, they can do their job like a well-oiled machine when they're there, and then they come back home and it's like, you know, perfect dad out there on the ball field coaching the kids and stuff, and you would never even know what the guy did for a living.
Yeah.
And then other people don't. You know what I mean? It just depends on the person.
Oh yeah. So you said you were medically discharged.
Yeah.
But you continued your drug habit up until that point. So what was the big shifting point for you?
We moved back to Ohio, back to Jackson. Really just because we didn't really know what else to do. And at that point, we'd been away from family for about 6 years, a little over 6 years. And we were like, well, we might as well take the kids back to at least be around grandparents and stuff and have some sort of life like that. And so I got medically retired in February of 2013 and moved back in that same month. So we moved back here, and I'm still, full-blown addict for sure. And, drank all the time and all that stuff, and moved back here, and I really didn't have nobody to do that stuff with. It's like all my friends were gone. I didn't have no one to be bad with.
Ain't nobody get high around here.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck? And of course, it didn't take long to find. You will always find those people.
Always.
Find it. And I knew a lot of these people before I left. So, and a lot of them were still doing the same stuff and had never moved past it, so it didn't take long to find what you're looking for. So, we continue this, this lifestyle. And my wife's like, she's just really getting done with it.
Yeah.
And she's like, she had threatened to leave several times. And, to this day, I don't blame her a bit. You know what I mean? I don't hold that against her at all. I'm like, I don't know why you didn't. You know what I mean? I'm like, I would have left me years before you did.
Yeah.
It's like no one in the world would have been like, you're a terrible person. If they knew the truth, you know what I mean? If they knew the truth about how I was and stuff like that. So, which a lot of people obviously didn't, so we moved back, and she's like, I want to start going to church again. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool for you, but I can't do that anymore. It was, to my, I had left that 12 years prior, and I had done, in my eyes, I was like, I've done way too much crap. To do that again. And, and it's like everybody else. You're like, oh, well, the church is full of hypocrites and this, that, and the other. And you say all this same stuff. And it's like, well, your job's full of hypocrites too. And you still show up to work. The bar's got a bunch of hypocrites in it. And guess what? You don't mind sitting there talking to them all night.
Yeah.
And so, yes, people are people no matter where you go. Newsflash. So yeah, she wants to start going back to church, and I'm like, yeah, that's not really my thing, but you can go for it, and of course my whole family's in church, and and a lot of our friends, were pastors. My brother was a pastor and stuff. So I'm like, and I'm like, that's good for them, but they haven't lived what I've lived, and all this stuff. And so I start coming on Sunday mornings just literally to have somebody to eat lunch with. Because I was, at this point, we lived back here for months and really didn't have no friends and stuff. We didn't really have much. And as far as, what to do. So we start coming and I just kind of sit in the back and kind of hang out and wait to eat lunch with people, just to have somebody to eat food with. And I would come in, all messed up, you know, and it just really sucked because I didn't really have many people to drink with, so I wasn't really like, you couldn't really, it's they call you an alcoholic if you drink alone. So I was like, I don't want labeled that.
I just need someone to sit here with me, so I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Where's my tag team partner?
Right, yeah, it's like where's all the people at? And so by this point, I hadn't really been drinking a whole lot, so that helped, I guess. Not really having other people to egg it on. I wasn't doing that as much. But the pills and stuff I was still pretty heavy on. And, convince yourself that you got to have them and all this stuff and all that junk that goes with it. So I was sitting here one day and my wife's literally was like, we're on the edge of divorce, and I'm like, I really don't have much upside anymore, It's like my whole life is pretty much fell apart in the past year. Like, my job that I loved, I can't do no more, my bag's all messed up. They wouldn't fix it. Now I got to try and find somebody that'll try and figure out something. And, I got all this pain going on. I got this going on. So much hate and anger from a bunch of stuff, all throughout life, and it just really felt like, man, what the heck else do I have, what do I have to lose? And I was sitting in a service one morning, and a buddy of mine who's does the music at the church, he just started singing this song, and it just tore me up. And I was like, man. So I'm sitting in the back, and I was literally, I had already had, we were prepared to go to a barbecue, and I was excited because I was like, people to drink with. All right. Like, when the service is over, we're going over here, and there's going to be a bunch of people there that are like me, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, woo, this is going to be great. And I never made it.
Wow.
Never made it there. That church service wound up just changing my life forever. And, you know, because I was like a lot of other people that's been through a lot of that stuff that carried a lot of hate and anger and pain and addiction and all this stuff, and had let that compile for years and years and years and be so hard towards everything. Like, I hadn't cried in 12 years. I refused. I was like, people's funerals, my buddies' funerals, watching people die and stuff, I was like, no effect. None whatsoever, you know. And sitting there in that service, and my buddy called me out, and he was like, buddy, he said, it's time to come home. He said, you know, in which I was raised in church, so I knew what he meant. You know, it was like, it's time to quit living this crazy lifestyle and get some stuff straightened out. So, you know, that was just the changing point for me. And I remember sitting there, and I was holding my son, so I handed my son to somebody else. And as I walked forward, you know, to the front of the church, I said, God, if this doesn't work, I'll never walk back in here again. I was like, if I'm not changed when I walk out, I'll never walk back in. And man, it was just for the first time really in my life where it was real to me. You know, it's fine when you're raised in church. You know, that's good. But at some point, you got to make a decision for yourself. And, you know, this was that point for me where it's like, okay, I'm all in, but if it don't work, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, which is the cool thing about God is he don't leave you hanging. So it worked out for me pretty well. You know, like I said, I was completely messed up. You know, because I would snort 4 or 5 pills before I even left the house. So I was 4 to 6 deep before 10 in the morning.
Right.
And so I was pretty numb by the time I got there. And I laid there, and I just poured my heart out. And I didn't really know what to say, didn't know what to do. You know, I wasn't church-eased at that point. You know, I didn't know the cool little sayings. All I knew was I didn't want to lose my wife. I didn't want somebody else raising my kids. You know, something's got to change. And for me, that's what it was. You know, it just wind up being, you know, an awesome experience that's forever changed my life. I mean, me and my wife are, you know, great now. Our kids are awesome. And obviously we're still together. You know, it's been 5 years now. So, you know, that really kind of shaped where I am now.
Oh, yeah. And
I do.
You know, you've come a long way. I mean, you're into all kinds of stuff now.
Yeah.
So why don't you explain kind of some of the opportunities, even just of late, that you've gotten, and, you know, the chances of both, you know, I don't know how much you want to talk about, but like some of your own endeavors you're working on, and then some of the other opportunities that have just kind of sprouted from, I mean, I've been with you when some of them have happened.
Yeah. So since then, you know, literally it just, you know, God radically changed my life in an instant. You know, when I got up off my knees from the altar, and I'm not saying to come to God you have to be at a church or an altar or nothing like that. It's just where it happened for me. You know what I mean? You could do it driving down your car. You know, it could be wherever. But I got up sober. And trust me, I was messed up when I got down.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this worked. You know, and it was, to me, I was so overwhelmed with the love of God. And I hadn't really felt anything like that before. You know, where I felt like, wow, a weight has been lifted off of my life. And, you know, all that junk just was gone.
Yeah.
You know, and that doesn't mean there wasn't a process, you know, to learn and you know, to change things in my life. You know, I had to change friends. You know, I wasn't going to be ignorant and put myself around stuff that I wanted free from. So, you know, I started changing my friends and start hanging out with other people that weren't doing the stuff that I didn't want to do. And I realized that there was a whole lot of people that are just like me, you know, that have got messed up into drugs. They're full of hate and anger because, you know, their childhood was terrible or something bad happened to them as a kid, and they've just carried that hurt their whole life. So I just started sharing my story, and it was just affecting people. And I was like, wow, who would have thought, you know, my little story would affect people? You know what I mean? I'm nobody, you know? And I was like, I'm just glad to be here, you know? And it's just, so I started sharing my story, and I got asked to come to the prison. And it was the first time I really spoke about, you know, my testimony as far as where my life was and where it is now. And that was only 6 weeks after, you know, surrendering my life to the Lord and just saying, you know, I don't want to live this life no more. That where I've got my life has sucked, and if there's a better way to do this, then by all means, let's try this. And and Jesus was that for me. So, you know, I tried it, and it stuck because it worked. So then I go into the prison and I share my testimony, and all these guys that are locked up, man, are locked up for stuff I did that I just didn't get caught for. You know, and I started telling them, listen, I'm no better than you. Not even any different than you. Man, it's like, I just didn't get caught, you know? And so it just began to see that how seeing somebody that can come through that stuff can help other people. So I just started talking to all kinds of people about it, you know, people that was struggling with that stuff. And since then, I've become an ordained minister through the church and travel all over. Minister at different churches, sharing the gospel of Jesus, and sharing, you know, just that you don't have to keep living that lifestyle. You know, that there is a better way to live, and you know, and it does, it will drastically impact your life. And so yeah, I've traveled out to California. Done some stuff out there, and it really opened up the door because of my military background to even do some of this stuff, because they're like, oh, you're a Marine? I'm like, yeah. And then they're like, oh, why don't you run security? All right. And then I wind up doing that, and then get called to DC to run a security thing for a huge event. Just got a call yesterday to go to Portland to another huge event that they're doing and want me to do security stuff for. But then I also get to do, you know, ministry stuff too. So it's like, it was really cool. Going to Africa next month in May to go teach in a Bible college and do a bunch of outreach stuff out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
where they've been getting bombed and shot at, and everybody's like, "Are you scared?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding?" Like, no, I don't care.
That's old hat.
Yeah, it's like this is cool with me. I'm good with it.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's, you know, the goal of this podcast for everyone listening is really to take a look at stories of people and who they are now, and how their past, both good or bad, has helped shape them. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Brandon, you talked about, you know, growing up in the hood up in Columbus, and then, you know, a lot of the big changes when you moved down south. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, your dealings with addiction, and then on into the military, and, you know, all the good and bad that came with that experience. Yeah. And it's interesting because something you said was you being open about the bad that you came from, not just things that happened to you, but things that you chose to do. Because a lot of times it seems like us as people, it's easy for us to look at all the external circumstances.
Right. Never take responsibility for what you did. Yeah.
Exactly. But you being liberated to do that created opportunities, not even that you intended necessarily to happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful thing, you know, for our listeners to hear. And don't get me wrong, if you're currently going through something, there's people out there that are available to help. But realize your story doesn't have to end here. Mm-hmm. The cool thing is,
write the period on that chapter, man, and flip the page and start writing a new one.
There it is. Yeah, because what you're dealing with now, what if you could flip that, and suddenly where you came from becomes the very thing that you're using to pull other people out of the same situation. But the key is you have to see where you're at.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, you hear the same stories of people that were homeless and now they're millionaires.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? At some point, they had to make a change in what they were doing that wasn't working and start implementing a new strategy, you know? And I love stories like that of people that were like come from nothing and it's like, you know, their whole life changed, you know, because I learned this thing, you know, or whatever. And it's like, and now they're running huge businesses and all this stuff. So, yeah, it's always, I love underdog stories.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody loves those movies, you know? It's like,
oh, yeah. Come
everybody
on.
can relate with being on the bottom and you know, even people that are rich, you know, love underdog stories because everybody likes to see somebody overcome.
Oh, yeah. And that's, when I think of your story, like that's one of the big things I think about is, you know, you got a good work ethic really young. Mm-hmm. And then even though the decisions you made led you down a bad path, now, you know, it's not saying that those decisions were good, but are now being used for good. Mm-hmm. They don't have to remain just a black spot on who you are as a person, but they can now help define the good and the strength that's in you now. And that's the goal of the State Strong podcast, is to give people as entertaining as possible, because you have to listen to my dorkiness, a chance to hear stories that, you know, maybe you can relate with. Maybe someone says something that hits a nerve with you and that helps you to see opportunity that maybe you didn't realize was there before. Mm-hmm. So for all our listeners, Brandon, really appreciate you jumping on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So Brandon and I run around together a lot. So hopefully I'll be riding his motorcycle soon. So and until next time, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon. And that's a wrap. Episode 1 is in the books. So I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. We're definitely going to be releasing more podcasts. I've got a litany of guests that I've both interviewed and others that I'm getting scheduled to interview. So stay tuned here. If you're on our YouTube channel, subscribe. If you're checking us out through some of the different podcast channels, definitely subscribe to the podcast and leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. Tell us if you enjoyed yourself, and hopefully we'll catch you again for the next episode. Thanks, everyone.